back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Lyons. Listener, if this is, I've been meaning to do this at the beginning of episodes, and then I'll introduce my cohorts. If you are on LinkedIn, as many of our listeners are, and you haven't already connected to us on LinkedIn, each of us individually, Patsy Feeman, Leb Tannenbaum, and myself, connect with us, but also do a quick search in LinkedIn in the search bar for the Frustrated CEO podcast. And every day we do a video snippet from one of our current episodes. So think of it as like a daily word of wisdom or a daily leadership vitamin, something that you can tap into and consume every day to keep you on track. So with that out of the way, I'm gonna today our topic today is something that we know leaders are frustrated about quite a bit. Not just leaders, but also their teams are frustrated about quite a bit, and that's ineffective meetings. So today we're going to talk about, we've got a very smart guest, somebody who is, I would describe him as magical at setting the tone for great business meetings. So I'm going to first welcome Patsy Feeman. Patsy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Patrick.
And I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our amazing guest, who's going to tell us how to have better meetings.
Excellent. It is my pleasure to introduce Leb Tannenbaum. Leb brings over 34 years of experience as a consultant, and he brings amazing energy and insight to every client he works with. He's been an executive inside of large publicly held companies, smaller publicly held companies, and companies that he's helped take public in the early startup days of online learning. He spent 8 years inside and 26 years consulting with organizations large and small, again, public and private. He has a deep belief in lifelong learning and that no one is a finished product. As a founder partner of New Legends Now, Leb focuses on consulting with organizations committed to scaling up. He works in partnership with clients to cover new and unique ways to positively impact culture, strategy, leadership, strategic execution, all that create results. He's worked with companies such as the Oregon Department of Transportation in leading culture and performance transformation, as well as a similar project with the New York City Transit Department of Subways. He's got some really good stories around both of those, especially that latter one. When not consulting, Leb gives back. He gives back both his time locally and to globally to organizations that really matter to him. He's happily married and the proud father of 7 children. I know. He loves biking, swimming, hiking, riding, another good topic to connect with Leb on, singing, and basketball. He once coached his son's basketball team to a City League championship in Portland, where he lives. Leb, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Patsy. Thank you, Patrick. It's fun to be here.
I feel like we've seen you before. Yeah. So if anybody is tuning into this, our first if this is the first episode you've joined us, Leb is also our regular co-host. So he's been with us from the start. But today we're putting him on the hot seat to talk about how to set the tone for really good meetings. So,
all right.
Yeah. So, as Patrick said, we've heard from many CEOs and executive leaders that too many meetings are inefficient and effective. So, Leb, we'd love to learn more about the value of getting ourselves present and focused for the work at hand so that we can be more effective.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when you think of it, think of yourself, think of the times you've been in meeting after meeting after meeting. And that's not uncommon, especially now, even with this whole shift to hybrid. People are not necessarily even fully present in the way that they used to be when we were all in person together, right? But think this kind of invention and innovation was born out of the recognition that sometimes we're just backed up. We're in back-to-back-to-back meetings. And so what we did is invent and create this thing we call the check-in process. So any of you people out there that are listening to this, if you work with us, you're going to get checked in before the meeting starts. And the notion of check-ins is that, I mean, even if it's the first meeting of the day, you've dealt with whatever it took to get you to that first meeting. And maybe some things are coming to the meeting with you. And the idea is, let's check in a way that we can become fully present for that meeting. So I want to kind of bust a myth, because when I have introduced, as an example, the check-in process to many companies, been doing this for a long time, kind of the initial response of the leader is, oh gosh, I mean, how can we spend 5 or 10 minutes when we only have an hour and we're losing, all this precious time? And what I want to say is, I guarantee you that if you use the check-in process, the 40 or 50, 30, whatever it is, minutes you have left, you'll have a much more effective meeting. So that's kind of the notion behind it all. So, what is a check-in? A check-in is you designing some question, or maybe 2 questions that you're asking of everybody around the table or on the screen. And the intent is that kind of question will cause people to pause, to stop, to think. And, I know for myself, sometimes in a meeting, and I haven't really even checked in, as an example, with kind of who I am, where am I emotionally, what are my emotions? And I may be dragging in emotions from another meeting into the meeting that I'm currently in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the kind of classic, this one takes a little longer, check-ins that we do is called the 4 emotions check-in. And you ask people, so here are the basic 4 emotions. Just give us anything that comes up for you that you're mad, sad, glad, or afraid of. Now, in some cultures, the word afraid doesn't fly. So you can say, well, concerned with, right? And people actually pause and they look and they go, I hadn't thought of it, but that last meeting, I was really frustrated. I started getting mad that we were spending so much time repeating the same kind of a different version of something someone said over and over and over again. Okay. Once they say that's that. Okay. Anything making you sad? Maybe it's, just the state of the world. Sometimes it just gets to me, and I feel sad. Okay. Anything that, what are you really glad about? Whatever that might be. So mad, sad, glad, and then, afraid or concerned. And afraid might actually be pretty revealing. It's like, oh, I hadn't thought of it, but I'm afraid we're not going to hit this deadline. And it's in the room. Okay. That person checks in. Next person checks in. And what's happening for you as a leader is people are showing up. They're actually, now I'm here for this particular meeting, but also for you as a leader, you're getting data you would not have. That is contextual data, right? For, oh, okay, this is like, and the leader doesn't get a pass. The leader checks in, and with all that kind of information that you would not normally get, that's where you start your meeting from.
Do you recommend that the leader go first, especially, if
Sometimes.
you're asking the team to get a little bit vulnerable?
Yeah, sometimes, because the leader can set the tone.
Yeah.
The
But
leader,
okay, so it's a good point, because the leader could go first, but if the leader gives a real superficial answer, then that sets the tone and everybody else will follow with superficial answers. Now, I don't think you're suggesting that the leader has to bare her or his soul and tell everything about everything. But I think the phrase that comes to mind is the deeper you go, the more you grow, right? To be able to open up
Mhm.
and share with each other where you are. It's about getting
Yeah.
present. Um,
And it's really not, it is intended to be kind of quick. So, let's not get overly concerned. It's not a whole meeting on psychological stuff about your emotions,
right.
but it is one of the longer check-ins that we use, but it is intended to really cause people to pause for a minute. Am I sad about it? Sometimes people say, "I'm not really mad about anything."
Mhm.
Okay. It's move on. And here's the other thing about it. It's not to be interacted with. It's to be listened to, right? It's not
That's
like,
important.
it's not even, "Oh, Patsy, I'm sorry about that. I didn't even know." We just are checking in,
Hmm.
right? So when that check-in occurs, um, there's a lot more information in the room. And the other thing is not only is it intended to connect you with yourself, you're connected to your teammates. You're connected to the other people in the room. Now, it may be, after a meeting, you want to follow up and say, "Oh, wow, I went through something like that."
Mm.
It just opens the door for connection and collaboration and literally a higher level of relationship among people.
Mhm.
So that's a longer one. Um, you know, More common, quick hitting, please share a win that you've had between last week and this week. If it's a weekly meeting,
Mhm.
just please share with us a win, and please share with us something that really didn't go as well as you wanted it to. And maybe you could add and what you learned,
Hmm.
right? And people they like it. It's like, oh yeah, this I get to talk about a win. And it may not be the traditional topic of that meeting, but they get to say something,
Yeah.
right? And everybody else then knows about it. And it's something that didn't go as well. And maybe here's what I learned about it. Okay, good. Then we're sharing a body of knowledge. And then that one's usually pretty quick. You're going
Mhm.
around the table. Patsy, what was a win? Let's do it. Patsy, share a win between the last podcast and this podcast, and maybe something that didn't go as well as you'd hoped for.
A win was taking on the design of a report that I'm doing. And the thing that hasn't gone as well is it's not going as quickly as I thought it was. So I'm kind of stumbling through it.
Uh-huh. Okay. So we know that now. You know, Patrick.
Yeah. So what comes to mind, and listener, we didn't know this question was coming. So these are literally like, this is off the top of our heads. Just this morning, I got back from a 2-day visit, a business trip that I took in a different state with a client. And I was there to do a training, and the training went really well. The client was very happy. So I would say that's the win. And what hasn't gone well this week is as part of that, I thought I was going to have more time between or during that visit to work on some other things for specifically another client, and I haven't gotten to any of that. I ended up just falling behind, so that's weighing on me a little bit. Even as it's funny as you talk about checking in to get present. Now it's like, okay, that weighs on me a little bit. Now you guys know what's weighing on me, right? More information, just like you said. That's valuable. You can, right? Yeah. Leb, I have been in enough meetings with you, and I've seen you do this. You are a wizard when it comes to the check-in question. I've told you this to your face. I've said this plenty of times outside of the podcast. But I guess now I feel confident enough to go on record because this will live out there for perpetuity. But you are a wizard in at setting the tone. But now, and you touched on it. A listener might be thinking, "Yeah, we don't have time for that. Like, I mean, we're just too busy. We're too
Yeah.
busy." Why does a check-in create a better meeting for the next 35 or 40 minutes than it would if you had that whole 60 minutes or 55 minutes after, people sit down and you open the meeting? Why is it better after a check-in than without one?
It's a great question. I would say the answer is based on the experience of doing check-ins for a long time.
Okay.
So it's not textbook. It's not the kind of data I can necessarily pull out and prove, right?
Experience is great.
Right. But you're coming into this meeting. Let's use what you just said, Patrick. You're coming into this meeting, and maybe the dominant thought in your mind coming into this meeting is, I need to get this thing done for somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. And I wonder if there's going to be time for me to kind of get to my phone a little bit.
Yes.
As opposed to, that's there. Okay, let's set all that aside.
Yeah.
I'm here. Right.
Yeah.
And because nothing's going to change except for what's here, and maybe, what's here in your heart and your head.
Yeah.
So to me, that's why. And when I was in high tech in a really large software company, I mean, it was meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. By the fourth meeting, I kind of didn't even know where I was or what. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
somebody pauses and asks for a check-in, and we show up, and we get a little more information or a little more connected. Then all the rest of the agenda is effective.
Yeah.
Much more effective. And that's been the experience, and it's been the feedback from clients.
Yep.
Like, wow, at first I thought this was kooky, this is
Yeah.
too kooky, and we're wasting time. And then they go, oh my God, that meeting was really effective. And I had no idea that Patsy was, struggling with this thing, that maybe someone in there could say, I can help with that, or I've gone through that. Here's what might make it more effective. So to me, it's really proven itself to be valuable. The job for the leader, however, is, depending on what type of meeting is and how crucial that meeting is, or what that topic might be, is to craft the check-in that you think is best for that particular group or for that particular meeting.
That's good.
Yeah. And I'll give you a real live example. Last week, I'm in a coaching session with a leader. It's 13 direct reports, in a global spanning several time zones, and great person, really top-notch people reporting to him. And he said, well, how do I know which check-in to use when? Because some are going to take more time than others. And, it was a great question. And so you have to play with it a little bit, and really you can write your own check-in. It's not like, we can share, a document of some of the stuff that we use, but I'll give you an example of one that he really personally loved and was really reluctant to do with his direct reports. And it was called the Mind, Body, Soul check-in. And when I first said, okay, so-and-so, we're going to do the Mind, Body, Soul check-in right now. And he was like, you could tell, he was like, okay, so mind, but it's not just a broad mind thing. It's like, what is dominating your thought process right now? So it's mind with a question. Then followed by, and he went right to it. It actually wasn't that long. Body, what are you doing to remain healthy? Oh, and right there, including if it's nothing, okay, but then that's an important reminder. You're a leader. You have to, it's a full contact sport. You have to remain healthy. And then soul. All I asked was, what do you do to feed your soul? He immediately started talking about his kids and dog, his family, his wife. I was like, okay, I've spent more time, and this is, over the last 2 weeks, and this feeds my soul. Some people, it's nature, whatever the case may be. So it sounds like, what? You want to check in around mind, body, and soul in a business meeting? He did it with all 13, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. They thanked him. They wrote him thank you emails and texts. Why? Because they're in a very rapid, result-oriented business, and it broke the cycle.
Mm.
And they had five, whatever it took, 3, 5 minutes. It broke the cycle. They showed up. They shared it. It. What he said to me was, it translated to them that I care about them as people.
Mm.
Yeah, and if you've been listening to any one of these episodes, you've heard that a number of times from the leaders that we've brought on, how important it is to convey to your people that you care about them. It's 2022 and the paycheck isn't enough anymore. They need to know that you care. And I'm a convert. I am, because Leb, when we first started working together, I, you know, I don't want to say I thought it was hokey. Maybe I'd actually, I probably, if I went back in time and asked myself in the moment, there probably were some that I was like, this is a little weird, a little hokey. And having seen and having participated in them and seen the impact that it has, enabling people to uh, put it on the table. This is what's dominating my mind right now, and there's just something, I don't want to say magical or mystical, or maybe it's psychological, about just naming what I'm carrying. That, like, by not naming it and trying to forge through the meeting the whole time, it's weighing on me. It's distracting me. There's something magical about naming it. Hey, this is what's dominating my mind right now. And then you can put a bow on it and set it to the side. You said it earlier. Nothing is going to change while we're meeting. None of that is going to get fixed or addressed while we're meeting. So the extent to which I can set it aside and be fully present in this meeting, that makes for a better meeting. And then I can go back and pick that thing up once we're done. But there's something about naming it that, at least for me, and I've seen it, the other people in the room, naming it enables you to compartmentalize it for the time being and then pick it up when you're done. It's really, so I'm a convert. I have to admit, it's yeah, you are the master at this, or a master at this for sure.
So I'd like to hear more about, I assume we have a wide variety of CEOs listening, and some are going, like you were talking about your client, great, I didn't know I could do that, I'm going to go do that. And I suspect there are a few people listening that are going, you got to be kidding me. Because we do have to connect with ourselves to do what you're talking about doing. But talk about the real value. I mean, you've been talking about that in many ways, but the real value, what would allow a listener to kind of push through those places they're hesitating to see a bigger picture?
Well, I mean, personally, I think if I'm leading a meeting, I want to be present as the person who's leading that meeting, right? So if I lead off with the check-in and it helps me be more present, or it shows something to other people about me that they wouldn't normally see, then our relationship is present. It's more, maybe more, it's expanding. And therefore, I would say, that's worthwhile, right? We come in all business, like it's all business, but it's not all business. I mean, one of our podcast guests recently said, you're not a cog, you're a person, right? And, we all know that, the cog and the wheel thing, right? Well, you're not a cog, you're a person. And especially, Patsy, like, think of the last 2 years, what we've all been going through.
Yep.
Right. Now, some people would say, well, you're crazy. You don't want to ask a question like around the 4 emotions, because who knows, somebody might burst out crying. Well, let them burst out crying.
Yeah.
Because when that's rare. So don't get me wrong. But if somebody says, I had a loss in the family, we lost somebody to COVID. That may be all they say. Well, how valuable is that if you don't know?
Mm-hmm.
It's huge.
Right? You're leading the team, whatever it is, 7 or 8 or 9, 10 people. Everybody knows that. Sorry for your loss. And it's present and it's out. To me, that is important data. Go to the ladder of inference, where, the data pool.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't we want some people data pool to be more effective and reach high performance as a team? Yeah, it's fun. You can go play games together, once a quarter, or, you go drink beers with, whatever that, and that's good. Don't get me wrong. But in terms of running highly effective meetings and building high performing teams, I'm finding that checking in is really valuable. I'm finding that checking in with myself is really valuable. Sometimes I just ask myself before I'm going into a client meeting, how am I, what is there anything I'm really, what's dominating my mind? So I can set it aside, like Patrick said. Does that kind of answer that?
It does. And what it's helping me to see, and it goes back to Patrick's comment a few minutes ago, the workforce is getting more diverse all the time.
Right.
People are wanting to be acknowledged for their authentic selves and for some of the lifestyle choices and for the gifts that we bring. And by doing the check-in, then you really allow all those differences to show up in a way that then once we start, we can work together at higher levels. So.
Mm-hmm. Even if it's like a really kind of surface levels, silly kind of question, like, what are you watching, on TV these days?
Yeah.
Like, give us your favorite show. Well, by the time 9 people give their favorite show, you're more connected and you've learned something, and and that could be a check-in. It's just like really simple. Hey,
Right.
what are you watching these days? And like, if you ask me that right now, my wife and I are super into this BBC show called Call the Midwife. We finished like the 3rd season, and it's so well acted, and it's so well written, and it's so hearty. And it's in England, in the poor side of London in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And we were like, all right, we finished the 3rd season. We must be done. And we found out there's 12 seasons. It's a huge hit. And we stumbled upon it, right? I'd be happy to be in a meeting and say, what are you watching right now? I go, oh, Call the Midwife.
You know what's interesting?
What's he?
But Leb, here's what's interesting about that. Again, so if a listener is like on the fence or thinking this is a bad idea, just as you were talking about that, your whole energy changed, right? Your countenance changed. You were like, there was this enthusiasm and excitement. Now, leader, think about, you've got everybody jazzed and excited. Now you start your meeting, as opposed to where people come in.
Yes.
Again, meeting to meeting, and so it's just a way to change the energy, to shift the momentum.
Yeah.
That extra couple of minutes to start the meeting, it's just it truly is. It reinforces what you said earlier. The rest of the meeting will be so much better than starting a meeting where people are coming from a place of low energy.
Yeah. Now that's a great point, and that does happen. I do see generally the energy level goes up.
Totally. And that makes for great meetings. So here's I'm going to hold mine. Leb, you've thrown out a couple of check-in questions. What are some of your go-to, because again, like, listener.
Okay, I'll give you a go-to.
You pull these out of. I don't know. It's magical where you pull these out of. I don't know where you get them. So what do you got?
Well, anybody who's ever golfed knows what a mulligan is, right? So one of the classics is, if you could redo something that happened over the last whatever period of meeting rhythm these people are in, what would you want a mulligan for? What would you want to redo?
Yeah.
And people know. oh, if I could redo that, I would have done this, and I didn't do that, and, or I would have spoken to so and so, so that to me is a really fun one. It's a really good one.
Yep.
If you do the mulligan thing, and so sometimes I also look at, well, what's going on kind of in the world, and how might it relate to this particular team? So. When the NBA, I am a big basketball fan, and so I was watching the NBA playoffs as much as I could, right? And I'm one of the people that doesn't hate the Golden State Warriors, right? But it always fascinates me when a team gets hot and maybe they're on a kind of a winning streak, and then they lose like badly, like by 30 points, or they lose to a team they should have never lost to. So I took that, and I'm in a business meeting, and this sales team is just smashing it. They're beating their numbers. They're ahead of quota, and so the check-in was that winning streaks can cause teams to lose to other teams they should never have lost to. What adjustment do you need to make sure that doesn't happen to you? Just right there. And they, they paused, they stopped, and they said really good stuff.
It's a great question.
Right. So some of it to me is also paying attention to, what's going on that people might know about. How do you bring that into the meeting as a check-in question? And, like I remember one of the people said, I'm starting to get cocky. But really, I know in my heart, I'm like, I want to be like a servant leader. I'm humble about what I'm accomplishing. So that's the adjustment I'm going to make. I'm going to stop feeling cocky and get humble again. I mean, that's pretty powerful, right?
That's great. No, it's very powerful.
About some pretty young professionals, right? So I think, that's kind of a classic. How are we doing about, or how are you doing about, you could pick one value or you could pick our core values. But let's say that, I'm working in a construction company right now. Safety first is a really high core value there. How are you doing with living the safety first value? Dan, right there. Ask the question. I'm getting sloppy. I'm doing good in the sunny weather. I'm doing bad in the bad weather, whatever the case may be. Right? Or how of all our core values, what's the one core value you think you would like to work on to be living that value more effectively? Right? What are you doing as a leader? You're finding out, you're hearing from people, but you're also underlining the importance of living the values, and you're not preaching it. You're not saying, "No, isn't it great? We'll have to live that." No, you're inquiring into the values through a check-in.
I'm going to have to go back and listen to the episode and write all these down for myself.
I know. Well, what I love about what you're saying that right there is then it helps me understand, I can count on Patrick for this one, or I can look to Leb for this one. So it helps me to see where can I really, where are the areas I need to build, and how can I go to my team members? Yeah,
that's really good. And honestly, some people say, I forgot about 2 or 3 of them. I haven't even thought about them. Okay, no bad. It's just and so to me, again, that's what the check-in process has to offer. I'll give you one more, maybe, as we start to maybe at least talk about some of the classics. Just on the spot, give me 3 words that best describe our culture right now. And people will say whatever they need to say.
That's great data.
And it could be that you're focusing on the team, on the culture of this team right now. It could be on the organization. So, the leader has to think about what they want to ask. But 3 words that best describe our culture right now.
Yeah.
And if you hear one word that's great several times, okay, yay, that's what we're doing. If you hear one word said a few times, that's more like we need to pick it up. This is becoming a challenge or a problem for our culture. Okay, you just got some data and it maybe took 5 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, those types of things, you can check in around decision making. You can check in, all the things that are important. You can check in around strategy. You can talk in. We did a check in yesterday about how we're executing
Hmm.
on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being we're just raw. You couldn't be executing any better, and a 1, we're really not executing well at all. Bam, around the table. There's a 5, there's a 7, there's a 3. And then maybe it helps you also pinpoint, a particular area where you can do something, make an adjustment and improve pretty quickly.
I think you're right. Right? If you may learn something right there that changes the course of the meeting, right? Hey,
Right.
Maybe we need to talk about that. Maybe that's more important than what we were
Right.
originally here to talk about. Leb, have you, in your experience, and you have a lot of it, have you seen this go wrong? Have you seen it not go well? Like, I'm thinking, okay, if a listener tries this, dips a toe in, and then something happens. I'm envisioning, what if somebody doesn't want to play? What if somebody doesn't want to participate? Do you allow that? Or what if it just seems like the whole team is staying at that 50,000 foot level, and you just know, that they're not being forthcoming? Have you experienced that, and what would you recommend?
No, it's a great question. It depends. None of this work occurs in isolation to all the other tools and processes and things that we bring as consultants to the companies we work with. So if the majority of the team, let's say in a 4 emotions check-in, says, I'm not mad about anything. I'm kind of glad about that. And it goes around the table that way.
Very superficially.
Right. And we've done maybe some work around community building and, hanging out in pseudo community. The leader might call it and say, I feel like, we just stayed on the surface with this check-in. And why does that matter? Because teams that hang out in pseudo community don't perform at the highest level they're capable of.
Yeah. If someone's not familiar with pseudo community, can you extrapolate on that just briefly, or is that too big of a topic to?
Well, it comes from some work by M. Scott Peck in a book called The Different Drum. So if you're listening and you want to know but the simple part of it is that pseudo community is the willingness to stay at the surface level with the pleasantries and the non-acknowledgement of our differences, avoid conflict, chaos of any type. And we all know that high-performing teams don't hang out in pseudo community.
Yeah.
Right. They get to know each other. They get shocked sometimes. They go through chaos. They go through conflict, and they share the emotions. And I mean, literally, being a sports fan, and it happens in a game. And but if so, it could be that the leader can refer to a model.
Yeah.
And just say, hey, I think there's probably maybe it's the wrong question. Let's try this check-in. But if you feel like your team is hanging out on the surface, and maybe there's a reason why. Maybe it has something to do with the leader. The leader has to be prepared to give up the 3 to 10 minutes. which would be a whole other thing. If the leader's looking really anxious and say, hey, let's speed this up.
Yeah, that sends a message too.
It does.
Yeah.
Another big topic, and you can write your own check-ins, but another big topic is communication, right? So if you feel like communication or an execution follow through, give me one thing that maybe the leader wants to know. Give me one thing that you asked me to do that I followed through on, and one thing that I didn't.
Boy, talk about being vulnerable.
Yeah, well, if you want to demonstrate vulnerability, it's all because it's all there anyway. Like I was in a coaching session this morning. The guy goes, I did all this work. I put the contract on this person's desk. I put the amendment to the contract on this person's desk. All they needed to do was sign off on it, and neither one of them are done. And now I'm waiting, and I got this client that wants us to start, give them a start date, blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, so what do you do about that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do about that. So you can, if we were in a check-in, with both of those leaders in the room or one of those leaders in the room, it's like, okay.
It's great. We were talking about this earlier, right? It gives you an opportunity to state it so that you can put it aside because you hear this so often. Like, okay, those things are sitting on your desk and you haven't signed them yet, and I'm waiting for them. And now we're going to sit together for an hour in a meeting. And half the time I'm thinking, why haven't you signed those things? Like, I want to pass you a note, or I just want to go, hey, I want to lean over. Can you sign those things? So you're right. It's all, to me, I think so much of the benefit, the power of the check-in is getting present, is taking those things out of my head, putting them to the side, so that I can be present for the rest of the meeting. So I think that's a great one. I even after all this time working with you and knowing you, I thought I knew most of them. You're pulling some out. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that one sooner? That would have been a cool one to know. And at the same time, you might just be making these up off the top of your head. That's how good you are at this. So, yeah.
Well, we're all good at it, and if you believe that it has real value to offer. And I think we do know that it does. And that when we've all been at times coming into a meeting pressed, coming into a meeting stressed, right? Coming into a meeting late, like running in, here's another one. You could do a check-in about whether you're prepared for today's meeting. Well, when I was in New York City with the Department of Transit and subways, I mean, that was such a bone of contention. If people didn't read something that they would read before the meeting. And then you have to spend time reading the thing in the meeting so that everybody can get, and if the leader doesn't know that, but what if the leader says, let's check in around, the 3 takeaways from the last meeting that we all said we do. If two of the 3 everybody did, you only have 1 to deal with. And you have to have. I'll say one more thing. We work with creating psychological safety for teams, because the other thing is you won't get perhaps an honest check-in if people don't feel like it's safe to say, oh yeah, I read that and I completed that and I didn't do that. They won't want to say I didn't do that.
Yep. But go back to the premise that we led with, how to have more effective meetings. If you throw out that check-in question and you then learn that the bulk of the team, or maybe even just a few of the team members, aren't prepared for this meeting, then to your point, you have an opportunity to pause, let those folks get caught up as quickly as possible so that the rest of your time can be more effective. Without that check-in, you're forging ahead and people are trying to tap dance and not expose themselves as unprepared. That happens all the time. And to me, those are the kinds of meetings that you leave and you think that was not an effective meeting. That was an ineffective meeting. So it's kind of that alone just proves the value of checking in. If you want to have more effective meetings, maybe throw out that question occasionally, or maybe you didn't start with that question, but maybe you kind of get to a point you're like, okay, this doesn't feel like we're all on the same page. Let's pause. Let's do a quick run around the table. Like, check-ins don't always have to be right in the beginning, right? You can pivot when you realize, I think we need to check in about readiness just for this meeting. So
it's a good one.
Brilliant. Yeah, and if the leader says, no blame, tell me why. And the person says, I'm just overwhelmed. I wanted to get to this. I just couldn't get to it. Yeah. And the main reason was, and maybe it's something else, in another part of the business. Maybe it's something that, is outside of the business that inhibited that. Okay. We're not doing it to blame, yeah, ultimately if it becomes a big accountability pattern, you have to bring it up. But again, the main thing is a lot of meetings that, as you said, Patrick, people say, oh gosh, they're just not effective meetings. Well, it's not just about whether there's an agenda or there's not an agenda. I mean, that's important. It's that, what can we do to help people show up for this meeting, to be present, to be whole, to be connected? And the one thing we have found that's relatively quick hitting that does the job is the check-in process.
Yeah.
So tell us, for leaders that are going, wow, I really like what this creates for my team, but I have really no idea where to start or what my next step might be. So somebody that's intrigued by this, where would you suggest they, do next?
Try it. I mean, I don't mean that
no
way. It's not complicated. I mean, just say, or let your team know that, we recognize we're fast paced. We recognize that sometimes we're in meetings back to back to back, right? Set the context. So, we're introducing the check-in process so that we can all show up, and it's going to be asking questions, take a little time up front, and then go after the items on the agenda, or the objective of the meeting. After we do that, I have really found that people have been welcoming some way to connect, some way to connect with themselves, some pause in the grind of. I'll give one last example. I was in a coaching session and we were talking about emotional intelligence. And I asked the person, what are the three kind of top things that trigger you, and what kind of emotions are attached to that trigger, those triggers? And this person got so excited to be able to talk about it and identify it that he went out and asked his direct reports the same questions. And he sent to me a thank you email that the person was just so happy, so appreciative, that number one, that the leader cared enough to want to know some things like that, but also that the person was learning something.
Cool.
Right.
Yep.
And their relationships, then they just shifted. It's like, oh, it's not all about objectives and results and and this person in general is very personable anyway. It just went further.
That's really good stuff.
It is good stuff.
Anything else? Yeah, or is it time to get practical?
I think it's time to get practical.
Yeah, let's get practical. And it's wow, as our guest, Leb, you get to go first, unless you don't want to.
Well, I mean, in a way, everything we've been talking about is in kind of the let's get practical category.
Yeah.
I would just say, let's get practical. You're working with people, not cogs in a wheel.
Yeah.
Recognize that, we're emotional. We have emotions. We have, recognize that people are going through a lot. And whether we're in person or on screen, we're still people and we're still going through whatever we're going through. I say this in terms of acquisitions is people data is as important as financial data and technical data. And, don't ignore gathering people data, your people.
Agreed.
Play with it. It's not, it's okay to be playful and be playful in the check-in process. You might ask a really funny question. What's your go-to joke? So can you imagine a meeting where everybody around the table shares their go-to joke? Everybody's laughing, and then you go into your meeting.
Yeah.
There are things that we want to, if we had a mulligan, if we could take another swing at it, we'd do differently. By acknowledging that, and then maybe, sharing, this is what I do differently, everybody learns. So, recognize the value of lifelong learning. Nobody's a finished product. People are going to make mistakes. And it's all how we deal with it and deal with the mistakes that are made, learn from them, and move on.
Yep.
I'm done. Who's next?
Good. Patsy, would you like to go or you want me to go?
I'll go.
Okay.
One is to just get started. Let your team know, set the context, tell people what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Just get started. I loved it was just craft the best check-in for each meeting. In some regards, I think that's more of an advanced move. So, but just get started. So craft the best check-in for each meeting. So be mindful, be heartfelt about what's going on, both in the outside world. I love the one about it's really important to know where you are.
Yeah.
Before each meeting or before each event or before. So check in with yourself. So develop that as a practice for yourself. And then, let's see. I think that's all for now. What have you got, Patrick?
All right. I had in terms of making the case for why do a check-in, just a reminder that checking in absolutely does sacrifice some time from your meeting, but the payoff at the end or the payoff after the check-in is so valuable that there really is an ROI on the check-in. We talked a little bit about sometimes you may need to check in the middle, which again requires you to be present and read the room and be able to say, right. The one example was, hey, let's pause a second. Are we ready? Is readiness, are we ready for this meeting? And if not, let's pause. Let's not try to forge ahead and have a crappy meeting. Let's take some time, get caught up. And so checking in the middle is okay as well. that I like this one. So the check-in is a great opportunity for you, the listener, the CEO, the leader, to show your people that you care for them. And I say that because we've been talking about the importance of that. We've been hearing about the importance of caring for your people from previous CEO guests that we've had, from our future of work people who've said, this is what today's worker wants. To me, here's a very practical example. This is an easy way for you to do it. Do a check-in with your people at the start of all of your meetings. Talked about this one. If the check-in is superficial, don't be afraid to poke at that a little bit. Don't be afraid to call that out and say, hey, it kind of feels like we're, and then pivot. Do we have the right question? I like, we talked about, you got to look in the mirror. Maybe the check-ins are superficial because yours was superficial. And so maybe you need to go back and go a little deeper, and then invite your team to follow. And then last one I've got is, again, in building the case for why you would set aside time for this. A check-in literally changes the energy in the room. So if your meetings are or have typically been low energy or blah, try a check-in. Try something that at the beginning that changes the energy, and then let that be the springboard to a more energetic meeting, more creative meeting, because of the high energy. Leb, I got all that from you.
I got one more.
You got one more.
I got one more. I knew there was one more nugget in here.
Hit
that
me.
high performing teams get to know each other.
Yeah.
And I would say, and value each other's differences.
Yeah.
It's good. Leb, any more that you want to add?
No, the only other thing I thought of is I don't start this way, but if a team has kind of gotten a little bit used to check-ins, to honor those style differences, and specifically introverted people. With teams I've worked with for a while, I send the check-in out with the agenda, so they have time to prepare. So I mean, that's a question. And a lot of times a spontaneous check-in is the best, but sometimes, especially with a specific type of check-in, I'll send it out ahead of time. So it's something to just consider.
Great.
Other than that, I think we covered it all.
Good. I think that was fantastic. Anything else for the good of the cause, Patsy?
No, I learned a lot.
I did too.
I'm going to use a lot of this. Yes.
I know. I said I wasn't kidding when I said I'm going to go back and listen to this episode myself and write some of these down. It's just, Leb, every time I get to watch you, not just in the check-in, in a lot of ways, but in particular in the check-in, it's fun. I learn. So listener, if you want to rent Leb for your next meeting, then you can contact him. Leb, if people do want to get in touch with you, if they want to learn more about just that, engaging you are a consultant. You do work with clients on not just check-in questions, but on strategy and on execution. So if somebody is interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
I would say Leb at New Legends Now, all one word, no caps.com. So Leb at newlegendsnow.com. Go to the Frustrated CEO and our LinkedIn page, because we're all there, and this is it, the three of us. Yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn, so make an invite and we'll connect.
Yeah. Beautiful. And listener, you can download this episode's Let's Get Practical from thefrustratedceo.com. That's our website where this episode and all of our previous episodes are housed, along with in the podcast libraries. So if you're finding us in the podcast library, check out the website, because every episode has a companion Let's Get Practical, which has steps that you can take tomorrow to start making inroads in your organization. Particular today about utilizing a check-in to set the stage for much better, more engaged, more present meetings than perhaps you have had in the past. So, and as Leb said, and we said earlier, come connect with all three of us on LinkedIn. You can find Patsy Feeman there, Leb Tannenbaum, myself, Patrick Lyons. Just shoot us an invite, and we'd love to connect with you. We'd love to hear if you have ideas for future shows. Thank you for sticking with us for another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. I guess that's it. Just farewell, and we'll see you
If
next
you want
time.
to be a guest, let us know.
Yeah, that's true. If you are a senior leader or an industry thought leader supporting CEOs, then yeah, you can contact any one of us. Connect with us through LinkedIn. Let us know. And who knows, maybe you can be a future guest on the Frustrated CEO podcast. Until then, we will see you later.